Death row in San Quentin had a sound, one that never fully went away. It was a low, humming noise, like electricity wrapped in whispers. Even when everything was still, even when no one spoke, the air felt tense, as if the building itself was remembering things. Remembering the men it held. Remembering the darkness they brought in with them. On this night, the hum grew stronger. Officer Grant walked down the long tier with 2 other guards behind him. Their boots clicked on the metal walkway as they reached the last cell in the block. It was almost midnight, the hour when San Quentin always felt the most alive and the most dangerous. The warden had received a message only 30 minutes earlier. A message that shouldn't have existed. A message from inside a death row cell. A message from Richard Ramirez. The Night Stalker. The man who had terrified California decades ago. The man who was supposed to be weak, sick, and fading. The man who was supposed to have no contact with anyone. The message was handwritten, and it was fresh. The ink still wet. It said one sentence. He visits my cell at night. The warden didn't understand it. The guards didn't understand it. No prisoner was allowed near Ramirez. He lived under extreme supervision. No one could visit his cell. And there was one more problem. Richard Ramirez had not written anything in years. Not a note. Not a letter. Not a message. Nothing. Yet here it was. Fresh ink. With that, the warden sent guards to check Ramirez immediately. Now, as Officer Grant reached the final cell, he placed his hand on the metal door and looked through the small window. His breath caught. Because Richard Ramirez, thin, pale, and silent, was standing in the center of the room, staring directly at the door as if he knew they were coming. His lips curled into the faintest smile. "You got my note," he whispered through the glass. Officer Grant stepped back. "Ramirez, what did you mean by that? Who visits your cell?" Ramirez tilted his head slowly, like a puppet moved by an invisible hand. "You'll see," he said calmly. "He comes at midnight." The officer felt a chill run through him. Midnight was only minutes away. The fluorescent lights above flickered. Then flickered again. Officer Grant turned to the other guard. "Check the cameras. Now." The guard took out his radio, but the radio only hissed. Static. No signal. The lights dimmed another notch. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Ramirez lowered himself to sit at the edge of his bed, still staring through the glass window, still smiling, but with eyes that didn't blink. "You came just in time," he whispered. "He doesn't like an audience." Officer Grant stepped closer. "Who doesn't?" Ramirez didn't blink. His voice softened to a whisper. "Him." The lights went out. Total blackout. A sound echoed through the death row tier. Slow. Steady. And unmistakable. Footsteps. Not the guards. Not Ramirez's. Someone else. Someone walking through the darkness. The guards drew their flashlights, hands shaking. Officer Grant shouted into the pitch black, "Who's there?" No answer. The footsteps came closer. 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 Then stopped. Right outside Ramirez's cell. A cold silence filled the air. Then Ramirez's voice drifted through the dark, gentle as smoke. "He's here." A loud metallic slam exploded down the hallway, the sound of another cell door jolting open. Ramirez began to laugh quietly in the dark. And the lights snapped back on. Every guard froze. Because the cell door 2 spaces down, the one that housed an inmate who had died months earlier, was wide open. Wide. Open. The guard spun around, panicked. Who opened that door? No one had the answer. Ramirez stood at his window, smiling, as if he had just watched a show created only for him. Officer Grant pointed at him again. "What's going on here? How did a death row door open?" Ramirez leaned forward, eyes glowing with calmness that felt more dangerous than any shout. "Do you want the truth?" he asked softly. "Then listen." The guards forced themselves to breathe. They forced themselves to stand still. They forced themselves to face him. Ramirez touched the glass gently, like he was tapping on a fish tank. "My story doesn't end," he whispered. "Even here. Even in this place. Even on this row." He looked down the hallway toward the open door. "You think evil stays outside these walls," he said quietly. "But it doesn't. It follows the ones who carry it." Officer Grant tightened his jaw. "Ramirez, you're isolated. No one can reach your door. No one can." Suddenly, all the lights along the death row tier flashed violently, on and off, like lightning trapped inside the prison. Then the PA system crackled to life. Not with a voice. With breathing. Heavy. Slow. Deep breathing. The kind that made every man on the tier freeze. Officer Grant felt his chest tighten. "Turn it off," he yelled. Another guard tried. The controls wouldn't respond. The breathing continued. Ramirez smiled like he finally felt at home. "You hear him now," he whispered. Then the breathing stopped. A long, low metallic groan echoed through the block. Something was shifting. Something big. The guards ran down the tier and saw the impossible. The heavy security gate at the far end of the row, the one that took 2 guards to lift manually, was rising by itself. Slow. Grinding. Metal screaming. The warden rushed onto the tier from the opposite direction. "Stop that gate. Now." But the gate didn't stop. It kept rising. And rising. And rising. Officer Grant looked back at Ramirez's cell. Ramirez wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at the gate. Staring hard. As if he recognized the shape appearing beneath it. A dark silhouette stood behind the rising gate, tall, unmoving, framed by the flickering red emergency lights. Officer Grant stepped back. Is that a guard?" But Ramirez's quiet voice answered from his cell. "No." The silhouette stepped forward. One slow step. Then another. Officer Grant's flashlight beam shook as he lifted it. He aimed it straight at the figure. The light hit the man's face. And Chapter 1 ends right there. The figure is seconds away from fully stepping into the death row tier. The open cell. The rising gate. The blackout. The breathing through the PA system. The message Ramirez wrote. The mystery visitor. Everything hangs in the air, frozen. Waiting for the next moment. The flashlight beam trembled as it finally struck the man's face. Except, it wasn't a man. Not exactly. The figure standing behind the rising death row gate had the uniform of a San Quentin officer, but something was wrong. His skin looked pale under the flickering lights, almost gray. His eyes were locked forward, unwavering, wide open, but empty, like headlights on a car that had been left running with no one behind the wheel. Officer Grant felt his breath catch. He recognized the officer. It was Officer Hale. A guard who had worked this tier for years. But Hale had been off duty. He wasn't scheduled tonight. And his face, something was different. Not violent. Not aggressive. Just, vacant. "Hale?" Grant called. "What are you doing down here? You weren't assigned to this block." No answer. The officer stepped forward again, legs stiff, almost mechanical. "Hale, stop right there," the warden ordered, stepping forward. "I'm giving you a command. Stop." Still nothing. Hale finally blinked, just once, then pointed toward Richard Ramirez's cell. Every guard felt a tightness run through the tier. Ramirez smiled again. Not a wide smile. A slow, eerie one, like he had been expecting this moment since the first day he arrived on death row. "You see," he whispered. "He always finds a way." Officer Grant turned back to Hale. "Hale, speak. What's going on? Why are you here?" But Hale didn't answer. Instead, he raised his other hand, and the guard saw something rolled up inside his fist. A piece of paper. Hale dropped it onto the metal walkway. It drifted slowly, too slowly, like time stretched around it. Officer Grant picked it up with shaking hands. The warden leaned close. "What does it say?" Grant unrolled it. The words were written in the same handwriting as the note left in Ramirez's cell. The same ink. The same slanted lines. The same pressure. It read, "He visits you too." Grant felt his stomach twist. He turned toward Ramirez. The night stalker was now sitting cross-legged on his bed, watching the confusion unfold like it was a movie made for him alone. The warden stepped closer to the cell. "You wrote this," he said, voice shaking. "How?" Ramirez shrugged lightly. "I told you," he whispered. "He comes at midnight." The lights above flickered again. The warden shouted, "Shut the gate. Lock this tier down now." But the security gate was still rising, now fully upright, and the mechanism that controlled it sparked with bright bursts of electricity. A loud crack echoed down the tier. And the entire power panel next to the gate blew out, spraying sparks across the floor. Red emergency lights washed the hallway. Officer Hale turned slowly and began walking back toward the darkness behind the gate. "Hale," the warden shouted. "Come back. That's an order." But Hale didn't stop. Didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge a single word. He walked straight into the shadows and vanished behind the red lights. Grant clenched his jaw. "What is happening on this row?" Ramirez answered. "You're trying to understand a nightmare," he whispered. But nightmares don't explain themselves. His calmness only made everything feel worse. The warden pressed close to the bars. Ramirez, enough riddles. Tell me exactly what's going on. Ramirez looked up at him with slow, lazy eyes. Some things don't die, he said softly. They just find new walls to haunt. The warden lost his patience. Stop talking in circles. What does that mean? Ramirez leaned forward so his shadow stretched across the floor outside his cell. It means you locked me away, he whispered, but you didn't lock him. The warden froze. Him who? Ramirez tapped the bars gently with a finger. The one who carries the dark, he said. You've met him now. Grant felt his skin crawl. He looked down the hallway, toward the open darkness. The tear felt colder now. The air was heavier. Even the emergency lights seemed weaker. The warden pulled himself together. We're not staying here. Everyone, back to control room. Move. The guards began retreating down the tier. But Officer Grant lingered for a moment. He couldn't help himself. He turned back to Ramirez. Ramirez, he said, voice low. Is Hale in danger? Ramirez looked at him, and for the first time all night, his smile faded. Everyone is, he said. Grant didn't know why those words shook him so deeply. He turned and hurried after the others. The warden slammed the physical lock on the death row entrance behind them as they reached the end of the hallway. The heavy metal door clanged like a prison closing inside another prison. As they moved through the corridor toward the control room, another guard suddenly sprinted toward them from the opposite direction. His face was white as bone. Warden. You need to come now, it's the surveillance feed. They rushed to the control room and burst inside. Screens filled the walls, showing every corner of San Quentin's death row. Except, every camera was showing the same thing. A black screen. A shadowy figure standing in the center of it. Not moving. Not blinking. Not speaking. Just standing there. Then the figure shifted slightly. Only slightly. But enough to reveal a faint, blurry face. Officer Hale's face. But the eyes. The eyes weren't his. The eyes were something else. Something empty. Something lost. Something wrong. The warden slammed his fist on the console. What is going on? How did he get into multiple camera feeds? The tech officer shook his head, terrified. He's not in the cameras, sir. The cameras are filming empty hallways. This thing, it's projecting onto every feed at once. The warden stared at the screen. Hale, or whatever was left of him, lifted a hand slowly. On every screen. Same time. Same motion. Then the speakers crackled. And a faint whisper filled the room. Open the row. One guard whispered, "Oh God." The screens flickered. Distorted. Glitched. Then the figure leaned closer. Too close. Until his face filled every screen. Eyes hollow, mouth closing and opening like a glitching broadcast. The whisper came again, louder. Open the row. The warden grabbed the emergency override key. No, he said, voice trembling. We're locking everything down. He turned the key. But every screen suddenly flashed a bright white. The system froze. Then rebooted automatically. One by one, the screens lit back up. Showing something the guards didn't expect. The death row gate, the massive security gate they closed moments ago, was rising. Again. The guards gasped. We locked that. It's impossible. How is it opening again? And then Grant saw something else. Something worse. Something that made him stagger backward. Because behind the rising gate, walking calmly, slowly, with no expression at all, was Richard Ramirez. Outside his cell. Free. Standing on the walkway. Looking right at the camera. Officer Grant's voice broke. But, he never left the cell, he was locked in, he. The warden shouted into the room. Who opened his door? But no one answered. Because right then, Ramirez lifted his hand on camera and pointed directly toward the control room. As if he knew exactly where they were. Exactly what they were seeing. Exactly how deep this went. His eyes seemed to darken. He shaped two words with his lips. Silently. He's here. And the lights in the control room went out. Chapter 2 ends right there. The figure in the camera. The rising gate. Officer Hale. The blackout. The escape that should be impossible. The message Ramirez wrote. The whispered warning. Everything stops at this moment.